back to another episode of the Nurture Effect podcast, hosted by Dr. Anthony Biglan, a pioneer in prevention science, best known for his work on nurturing environments, community-level behavior change, and his books, The Nurture Effect and Rebooting Capitalism. Co-hosting with Tony today is one of Values to Action's board members and volunteers, Dr. Allison Sharko. Our guest today is Dr. Stephen C. Hayes. Dr. Hayes is a foundation professor of psychology at the University of Nevada, Reno, and a co-originator of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, ACT, and the broader relational frame theory, making him one of the most cited psychologists in the world. His work established contextual behavioral science as a unified scientific framework and has shaped both clinical practice and basic behavioral research globally.
Now, where ACT is weak is where you are strong, Tony, and where prosocial steps in and so forth. Is that, I'm a psychologist, and I focus there. But we now know that the social processes, and I gave you some examples, mirror, and you even see it in things like Lynn Ostrom's design principles, mirror the processes that we've discovered. I think discovery is an okay way to say it, that apply to all of the major ways of moving. The psychological side can be scaled to the social and psychological and even the biological, because your body responds differently when you start adopting a more open, aware, and actively engaged. You literally, your telomeres aren't as short and as much. You're going to live longer. Your cardiovascular problems tend to go down. You begin to handle your health problems better. There's pretty good evidence that people actually can have a more successful life with some of these chronic diseases and so forth, almost every single one of which is influenced by the things that I'm talking about. So that would be my vision, is that start with the need, teach the processes, point out to the people that these same processes can scale, and then provide the structure and the encouragement to let the particular groups move forward, putting these principles into action, and avoid doing the flip side. If you want to have your group about how we're going to shame everybody. Now, you mentioned the Democratic Party, but Tony, for goodness sakes, there's people of really good hearts and good, wonderful people who are card-carrying Republicans, or Trump, not just Trumpian voters, but people really believed in the things that he's.
Well, I was actually, as I said, Democratic. Point taken. Just leave it at that.
D. And the woke culture thing was a distortion of psychological flexibility in the name of something that's prosocial. So it's not as simple, left, right, red, blue.
Oh, I agree. And
it's human. And if we can't figure a way to talk across these divides, but then look at what the data on what helps people talk across divides. And it turns out the psychological flexibility processes, or kind of things for them, if you just look at what brings together into groups, and you kind of ask me to look at that. Let me give you an example. Here's a process called cognitive closure. There's really nice meta-analyses on cognitive closure, wanting it to fit together, drives polarization and extremism. I have the answer. Well, that means I don't have to sit through this discomfortable thing of, I don't exactly know, and I've got all kinds of things in my head, and I have to listen and learn and have genuine conversations. That's harder. It's a lot easier to say, I'm right.
So is it plausible
that you're the victim? You are now very close to being victimized. Here's another one: psychological rigidity. The flip side of psychological flexibility predicts partisan intensity. Do you think partisan intensity is helping the world right now? Look around the world. What's happening is change is happening so fast that people are retreating into these closed cognitive things. Why? So that you don't have to challenge yourself with taking the perspective of the other person. How the hell could they have voted for that guy? They must be evil. Both sides are saying it.
Well,
Both
is
sides are
ACT
saying it.
is there data on the effect of ACT on the ability of people to communicate across the political divides that we have?
Well, there is data on cross-partisan dialogues. For example, some of these things you'd think of logical, let's bring people together. I got criticized when I was written up in Time magazine 20 years ago by John Cloud. The closing sentence was something about my extremism for saying that, ACT might be of help in the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Mm.
That's not extreme. He died at an early death, John, and in part because he couldn't work on his own psychological flexibility skills. He was an out of control alcoholic, being asked to do what reporters are asked to do, like run to, ask the parents of the children who were shot up by Adam Lanza.
Mhm.
I'm blocking on the name, but or see bodies fall out of the Twin Towers. That was the kind of stuff that he was asked to do, and drink as the only way of dealing with it. But look, uh, there are data that uh, partisan dialogues can work, but here's when they work: when it fosters perspective taking, when it fosters genuine conversations and greater empathy. When you, in other words, go into the other person's head and kind of look back at these issues from that perspective. And if you've ever sat with somebody who has really different political views, you will find you share values. I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
And you will find that some of their beliefs make perfect sense given their particular history. And you don't need to quickly correct it any more than they need to quickly correct you. What you need to do is enter into a genuine dialogue, find out the places where you do overlap. Can we build community around that? Start somewhere.
Yes. It-
And and this is as old as a good small town. When small towns work or when villages work, and if you just look at how multi-level selection even produced the kind of creatures we are, because we're the tribal primates who learned how to cooperate. We learned how to cooperate with our neighbors. Now, sometimes it's too much, and we do have jails for that reason. And we used to cast people out from the tribe if they were, hostile enough to our functioning. Okay, that's possible too. I'm not going to say, oh, let's have a dialogue with somebody who has a gun to the head of my child. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to take him down and put him in jail and make sure he doesn't pull that trigger. But that's not the real face of the conflict we've got now.
Yeah. I don't want to leave you with the impression that what I'm looking for is a way um, to fight the MAGA people. The MAGA people are victims of the ways in which we have immiserated a huge proportion of the population, and and that's what I'm trying to do is be helpful to folks. Allies outlawed,
Just say there was a study done with, they called it different names. You have to figure it out. They called it subordinate identity, where when you bring together, you actively pursue finding the subordinates where you overlap and connect.
right?
And it was part of it thinking about shared identities, places where we share identities rather than partisan ones. And what it leads to is more trust, cooperation, and responsiveness to outgroup members. So it spreads. So, if we want something to spread, we have to find a process that's healthy and meaningful and build from there. And it can happen at the social level, it can happen at the psychological level and go to the social level. It can happen even, I think, in dealing with sort of physical challenges and so forth. So it can start anywhere. And
So is
that
it
means
plausible?
where do we need to put these things? I think we need to put them in the schools, but we also need to put them in the primary care clinics. We need to put them in the police force and the military. We need to put them, into manufacturing. But one of the things that's of great irony, and I always had great hope for this, but I'm not sure, is that do you know that there's pretty good evidence that you can get a far more effective workplace that will make more money for the people who want to make money by allowing a psychologically flexible workplace to occur, which means giving up some of your control, dude, and encouraging the development of the psychological flexibility of workers. But if you want to just be the dictator, you can't do it because then it's my way or the highway. But that's anti what we're talking about here. And it turns out that is the harder way to make money. So I'm thinking even corporate interests, but you need laws like B Corps and so forth that allow corporations to compete with an even playing field. And I'm back to AI. I do think there's some chances that that could occur. I do think in this, change 2.0 environment where more and more people will be able to access the best brains on the planet in
Well,
their computer.
well, I I use AI to remind me about various aspects of ACT frequently, and it
I
knows
do
that stuff.
too.
But
I do
the
too.
interesting issue is, can we build in values in these AI programs? And
I think we can because values are reinforcers that don't go away. The
yeah.
things that reinforces that go away, if you say something like money, your money can go away. If I care about money because I'll have the money to do something that will help people who are suffering in this way. If you had no money at all, you could still do that to a degree. If you still have breath, you could do it just by showing those very processes. I mean, people who are gardeners who've moved you. Can I give an example? My sister died of multiple sclerosis. She was bedridden for the last 8 years of her life. The last 4 years of her life, she couldn't leave her bed. She had to be lifted out, and then it was so hard that they couldn't lift her out. And then her legs couldn't move, and then her arms couldn't move. And then eventually it was only one hand that could hold up a phone enough that I could talk to her. That was it. Okay. And what did she talk about when I talked to her? Oh, look outside the window. See the bird there? My grandchildren are coming over to visit me. I just visited them 2 days ago. I was down in Phoenix and I visited my my sister's son and daughter and their children. They still are channeling their Grammy. They were influenced by her because they could see her kindness and her humanity when everything else was gone. She had nothing. She couldn't even move. So come on. I mean, no matter where you start, my point isn't that we should accept our lots or that we shouldn't work really hard to deal with economic injustice or things like that. No, the exact opposite. The very first ACT trial after the 20 years of developing it was Bond and Bunce 2000 with bank care workers who had to call people up and say, you haven't paid your loans, which is horrifying. And our comparison condition was a behavioral condition that had been previously proven to work. Change your environment to change your stress, or we did an ACT workshop. Okay, at post, it looked like change your environment. You got more changing demands of your environment. By follow-up, ACT was beating that control, plus changing your environment, change your stress, didn't change your stress.
Mm.
So, I think empowering people from the bottom up, but not in a passive way. This whole idea of, oh, we'll just do mindfulness and that, where's the values part? Oh, that's not in there because that's only in the people. Well, wait a minute, it was in the wisdom traditions. Yeah, but people just want me for stress. No, don't do that. Don't drop values. That's the whole point of it. We don't want selfish mindfulness, which is what we've created.
So, so I have one more question that Allie actually wrote. And it is, what advice do you have for us as we try to build a movement of people collectively to collectively work together toward a more nurturing society?
Well, I'm dropping some things in here just that are but uninformed opinions. They're only informed by my own life as a practitioner. When I say practitioner, you probably mean as a psychologist, as a practitioner. I don't mean that. No, I was a political activist before I was a graduate student, and I was trained by one of the best labor organizers on the planet, a guy named Ed Koopel, who put the first citizens initiative ever on the California ballot, Proposition 9, that was going to rein in the excesses of big oil and of in the interests of the environmental movement that led up to Earth Day, the first Earth Day. And we were blown out of, boy, we were ahead on all the polls and then blown out by Standard Oil of California in a very corrupt way. We actually got the memos. It's before Nixon. People had no idea, that at that level they could do corrupt things. Absolutely, they did corrupt things because they knew this day was coming on global warming and global climate change. They knew they had the best science out there. It's just like, big tobacco knew. Of course they knew. But meanwhile, they got all these assets in the ground that they have to burn in order to make money. So they're going to burn it. Well, wait a minute, that's going to burn the planet. Is that, yeah. And what Ed taught me is that groups are the only thing that matters.
Right.
But you have to form them from the bottom up. And sometimes you have to lead from behind. So I've lived my life as a political practitioner. If you say, am I a researcher or a practitioner? I'm a practitioner. I'm a political practitioner. I've formed three major scientific societies, one of which collapsed, and two of which lived on, one of which I'm a little disappointed with, but not completely. What was called the American Psychological Society, which I can tell the
I
story all
remember
the
it.
time.
Yeah.
I actually stood up and said, we ought to do this. And if I hadn't, I don't think it would have happened. And now even their own history doesn't tell that part because it was a year and a half later when it went from my lab to gradually, eventually with an office in DC. Someday that story might be told. I might write it down. And then ACBS and ACBS, but then look at what's in there. We don't um, certify therapists. We don't do the things that pull control in. We give control away. And I'm doing some leading from front now because I'm so freaking old that things I want to have happen, I'm trying to speed up a little bit. But
I know the feeling.
yeah, I know you do it. I think leading from behind is a far more effective way to do it. And if I had another 50 years, that's the way I'd still be playing it now. Wouldn't
What?
even allow people to say I was the founder of ACT. I still don't. You can
Well,
say originated. Wow.
I've sketched that what we want to do is have an act as an introduction, inviting people in. How does that relate to lead from behind?
Well, what it means is, Tony, I think we need to start with each of these places that you go. We need to listen, not just speak. We need to
Yes.
create community in ways that put the core of what needs to happen inside that community, uh, some of these habits and practices. I'll give you an example. ACBS tries to live what it says. It's organized itself to be more accepting and listening and more values based in all these ways. I mentioned things like not certifying therapists. A whole bunch of people want that to happen, including in ACBS. And we've just barely kept the walls up. And we almost made the mistake. I almost made the mistake. I literally had a training company, where I would have made a gazillion dollars by just certifying all ACT training, all of me. And just before the first workshop, I realized what was happening. I shut it down and didn't start it again. And now I do training and I have a training company that I started 15 years later after there was a recognized trainers process that was run so democratically it cost $80. Why? Because people volunteer their time to certify competitors for themselves. How did that happen? We created a cultural practice that reflected the open, aware, and actively engaged So, and if you go to a Worldcon, you feel it, man. You walk in, and then half an hour later, you're kind of feeling because people are walking the walk, not talking the talk. So my answer to you would be find ways to take where you want to end up to be the vehicle for getting there, so that even if your sister Suzanne could do nothing but hold your hand up, you're still putting something into the world that is what you want to put in the world. If you jump ahead and say, if it all works, it's going to have ding, 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 and you try to force feed that into the world, people are going to go, wait a minute, who are you to tell me to do that? Or whatever. They'll have
Well,
101
no,
ways.
I think
And
that's
I'm not saying you're doing that, of course, Tony. I'm
well,
not
no,
saying that.
no.
My honest
Well, no,
feedback would
I
be that.
think you're right that this is a problem. And, just take family economic well-being, right? Um, I'm not sure that I, I have to get
Well,
people to
what,
understand how, how harmful that poverty is there,
sure.
and how important it is to get to the point where there are no families that aren't going to eat because the Fed's government stopped when we had that last period when they weren't giving, and there were all these people who weren't going to get any food because they were stopping that. And you go, well, yes, they should have it, but the other thing is, why do millions of people are about to starve because they can't get that? The reason is that they don't have a good income, and that's because over the last 50 years the corporations have basically um, you know well, you look at the curve for the increase in income of most people, and about 1970, that curve stopped going along with the curve of the increase in income for corporations.
Yep.
So admonish me, tell me what we should do.
Well, yeah, I'm not an expert in there, but I do know that I, if you just look at how people mobilize resources to handle these kind of financial problems and to in community and so forth, I'm certain, and I have you threw this at me when we were doing our onboarding that that was what you wanted to talk about. And I hadn't done the deepest research on it, but I do know that it yields to that. And I gave you an example of the bank workers. There's multiple examples like that in IO work of how people get empowered in ways that they're able to walk up the ladder to be able to manage. I mean, just give you an example. Sometimes uh, getting a good job or getting a job at all, and then being able to move up the ladder in a way that it's a more secure job and so forth has a lot to do with how we support the development of workers, but it also has to do with the psychological skills of the workers. And so, can we do anything to empower people to be able to take advantage of the things that are available? There's that. There's another one, which is we're entering into an employment optional economy. I think we're within 10 years of a world in which a job for everyone is optional. That's my belief. When I look at the exponential increase of what's happening with AGI in the world, we're going to have a choice, gang. And it's interesting because it bites back on corporations, which is if we get to a point where um, robotics can replace all the workers, who's going to buy the products that will make people rich?
Bezos has not thought of that.
Well, Elon has. Elon's a nut, and he's as a person who sat next to me was a major person in his orbit. I won't mention it because it'll hurt that person. Elon is not a good man, but he is a great man, and that's unfortunately a lot of our great men from JFK down. I mean, just look at How many heroes have feet of clay? Almost all of them. But there are some ones that pass that. But I do think the world that our children or you, Allie, will grow up in. You're already grown up, you know what I mean. When you're 77, you can say things like what I just said. Is going to be so different. It's already so different. You know, I got up yesterday and I asked Claude Cowork to do a little deep dive on some of the ACT literature I knew it was out there on the things we are going to talk about. When I got up this morning, reminded me of a whole bunch of stuff. And I found this study I held up on my own, but I knew it was out there. I could
Yeah,
have
could
lived
you send me the
without it.
link to that?
Hmm? Yeah, I
Send
will
me.
send you a link to
Yeah,
it.
good.
The Healthy Mind study. It's very nice, but uh, you know, can we actually, what would we have to do politically for us to tax the robots? Of course you could tax the robots. Of course you
Well,
can.
it would
Of
be
course you
very
can.
helpful. It would be very helpful if the value and norm of everyone should have adequate food. They should have a nurturing environment, basically.
Well, yeah, and friends, if you start looking at job replacement in terms of AGI and robots, uh, which job are you talking about that you think is not going to be replaced?
Well, I mean, it's all. I've got two sons who are in the programming business, and they're worried.
No shit. Excuse me. And if they're, however, if you look at coders who are up at that level and using AGI tools, so they're up at the level where they have a
So
consistent job, blah, 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 there's a
Mike is des
significant number of them who just love it. Why?
Mike has designed a system that facilitates programmers using AI more
There you
effectively.
go. There you go. And what the way they describe it, if you look at the ones who are really happy in what they're doing and they're prospering, etc., what they say is, now I'm able to do just the creative work and I don't have to do the scut work anymore.
Yeah,
Because chasing down an error in code, you could, especially, legacy code or something, you could spend like days, but it's
yeah,
not creative work. But how to really solve, okay, so now my son is in computer science and game design at Purdue. Pretty darn good for that. It's top 10 for that kind of thing. Okay.
right.
Yeah. And where's he going to get a job? Well, he's just released his first game. Well, not first fully out there yet. And it's really, really a good game. And he's worked really, really hard on it. But is he going to be able to be paid for all the programming he did? No. Why? I mean, I can code a game today,
Yeah,
it's in Claude code as of this week. Do you understand how fast change is happening? I mean, OpenClaw was only 7 months ago. Claude now has the replacement to that, and it started in November and landed here in March. Friends, we're jumping eras in three
yeah.
months that used to take 3 decades. So let's not be the Luddites. Because you know what we're going to do? And some lefty politicians are going to do it. We're going to stop AI. We're nobody. Yeah. And the kids are going like, yeah, as as they use AI.
Yeah.
Like Elvis is bad. I mean, come on. Don't do that. Something that's stupid. Can we harness this amazing human achievement that we may be creating a machine species, I think, or at least creating a wonderful form of intelligence. But
We
that's,
better work on the values of AI.
yeah, well, it depends on how we use it, the values of those who program it. And if we allow AI simply to be a reflection, which is going to happen, of human beings, period, end of story, of course we'll have evil AI in there. We're going to need regulators in the AI
Right.
world fighting down the evil AI bots. It's already here.
From
So,
that, from more of this evolutionary perspective, what I'm hearing you saying is work is what the current state of being a worker is today is evolving. That the
fast.
jobs that are being selected that are needed today are potentially becoming extinct and being replaced by AI technology, but that leads to variability for and possibility of other types of work and possibly work that's not inherently tied to monetary incentives.
Well, and I think we can have, come on, Nixon proposed that a guaranteed income for everybody. And when you're born, you have it. I mean, in some states you have it. In Norway, you have it. Come on, we can do this. This is not, and oh, then people won't want to work. Work will be optional, but that doesn't mean that your life is optional. What are you going to do with the opportunity? If the cost of robots get driven down enough and so forth, which will happen. I mean, we already have our little micro robots right here. What is the cost of Claude right now on your machine? There's a free version that does an amazing amount of stuff. All right, so, oh, you have to have a computer. Yeah, do you know how many people have one of these? I mean, you used to say, oh, you can't use smartphones. That's only for rich people. Are you kidding me? Look, dude, psychotherapy is available to something like 10% of the planet. 90% can't afford it. Something like 85% of the planet holds one of these. So no, and there's a bit of Ludditism I had to face, or people saying, I shouldn't be doing apps or websites, which I did 20 years ago because I'm only feeding rich people. Yeah, go look at that. I have a picture I show of, an indigenous person in Australia under one of those trees with a long didgeridoo and looking at his smartphone. It's so, come on, if you want to reach everybody in the world, where's your app? Well, it's not going to be apps. Apps are dying. It's where's your agent? And so we've got to move at the speed of the world now. And that means in our organizational thoughts. And so I'm not smart enough to know what that is, but I am smart enough in how I'm back to I've lived my life as a practitioner, a political practitioner, not partisan politics, but the original meaning of empowering the people, the politic of how can we draw from the creativity and ingenuity that allows us to put open, aware, and actively engaged lives into the world in a way that takes advantage of this cool things like guaranteed income and taxing robots. To me, if you're not thinking about that, politician, if you're not talking about that, citizen, you're not talking about what your 10-year-old is going to face before the end of high school. So wake up. I mean, come on. The world's changing that fast. For a decade's happening in 3 months. And it's going to go faster because the AGI is now improving itself. Do you know that Claude code was mostly written by Claude? They haven't announced that. They have announced it over there in ChatGPT. The AI is creating the AI.
Right.
What does that mean? It means a function that was exponential becoming vertical. The apps that will be available, the tech, the tools you will have next year, this time, will be orders of magnitude different than what we've got right now in areas that are even beyond our imagination right now. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know that it involves people, and I know it's an area of income, that it doesn't just involve 40-hour work weeks. It involves spreading the wealth. And when we talk about it as per capita, what does per capita mean when you can have a billion new capitas, actual robots walking around with a head and maybe access to stuff that's smarter than you? What does that mean? It didn't, so it no longer means the the net zero, the sum zero game we've been playing, where if I have the money, you don't. It does not mean that.
Which is why I want to promote the value of saying that we want a world in which every person has the things they need to thrive.
And if you say that to the voters in Indiana, and what we're saying is look, you're a farmer or whatever, not as a charity, but as a foundation for you and your children that came from the wonderful things that we have funded and done with our educational system and our grants and all the rest. Look at what we've created here. And we can use it, not by passing the laws that prohibit robots from working in the field. Don't do past that stupid law. People don't really want to be just doing that. Pass the laws to make sure that the wealth that will come, that is coming right now, in the new and creative ways that we can create value for human beings, are there for your children. And by the way, for you, maybe not tomorrow, but 3 years from now.
Well, the challenge is that as long as the billionaires have the billions, there's not going to be enough money for what I think we would both agree it needs to be,
Well, I don't
a
know. I
certain
mean,
level of income.
we've kind of really messed around with that, with the Supreme Court decision that money is speech. We really we already had a problem with our Constitution in the
Oh,
USA
absolutely.
because it's not democratic. Everybody knows we don't have a democracy. We've got a republic, and it was built on slavery and on wealth
We
and
we
land.
have we have three papers written on the way in which the Supreme Court decisions have affected at least three of the aspirations in the preamble to the Constitution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're moving in a direction that maybe we can take advantage of in some ways. I won't get into that politically, but it is what it is. But I do want to say this: the U.S. of A. is not the whole world, and
It's
AI
not
can
what?
go anywhere. AI
Yeah.
can go anywhere. So if you really think you're going to control it by regulation in the US of A, well, wait a minute. What about China? If you think it's just China and the USA, well, what about the island off the coast? I mean, if it's connected at all, and Starlink right now
Well, you
is,
better hurry up and get ACT out to more people. You haven't gotten enough people.
well, I think we really want to be in a conversation with the world about what is, because it's not just ACT, and I keep saying that because these core processes are in our wisdom
I
traditions, our
agree.
religious
I agree.
traditions, they're in our best of our educational traditions, our philosophical traditions. So let's really come together and try to catch up with the wave that we've created and not
Well,
get sucked into it, but stay ahead of it enough that we
from
can.
time to time, I have had in mind writing a paper for ACBS, which is largely a clinical group, and I want to bring in the public health issues.
I came out of kind of public health, and I've done a lot with public health, as you may know, and there's a lot in ACT in public
Yeah,
health, as you may
yeah.
know. So yeah, and traditional public health also has some of the telling people what to do qualities instead of something more like the land grant cooperative extension, reach
Right.
out and help people develop. And so
Well,
that humble extension is a crucial part of public health, in my opinion.
hopefully we can send you some plans and you can uh, give us some feedback on it. But this is just another place where ACT is hopefully going to make a difference. So, Allie, do you want to say anything more?
It was great getting to spend time with both of you this morning. And yeah, as Tony mentioned, we are trying to weave in the psychological flexibility processes into values to action and create an Act for a Nurturing Nation workshop to be accessible for anyone who is suffering right now and needs help orienting back to what's really important to them. Um, and it's just fascinating conversation. My mind is spinning in all sorts of directions now. So Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. I enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to the Nurture Effect podcast, a Values to Action initiative. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Values to Action is a community of scientists, clinicians, and concerned citizens that seeks to leverage behavioral science, affect change, and make the world a better place for everyone. Join the movement at valuestoaction.org.